She is the most fashionable kid in Pyongyang. She has attended more intercontinental ballistic missile launches than most four-star generals. And she always claps politely alongside her Supreme Father and gets broadcast nationwide. In the kingdom, they call her the most beloved daughter. But foreign media call her something else, the little princess of North Korea. Our little princess was recently featured in the global headlines, as if she were being officially announced as the heir to the throne, destined to become the first female ruler of North Korea. On February 12th, lawmakers from the fake Korea dropped this bombshell. Accordingly, the National Intelligence Service assessed that Kim Jong-un's daughter, Kim Ju-ae, had moved from the phase of successor training to a new stage of a successor designate, with claims that our princess is being treated as a very high-standing figure. It is, to put it mildly, a big shift in Seoul's intelligence world. As recently as January 2024, the same agency said it was too early to conclude Ju-ae would become the heir apparent in a deeply patriarchal political culture. And our current supreme leader was still young and appeared to have no major health problems. So, what's really going on? And what do all of these mean? In this episode, we break down the ongoing succession drama and share some of our own analyses. We explain why this incident could be a deeply vicious attack on the kingdom from Seoul's evil imperialist spy agency, and examine what we can learn from the past succession tales of Pyongyang. You know, authoritarian succession is not an exciting television drama broadcast worldwide, but the most vulnerable moment for the rule of a dynasty. A tiny mistake might lead to a total collapse. Again, before we begin, a mandatory tribute to our loyal channel members. You are the pillars of our humble studio. You help us to sustain our production without any food shortage. Thank you, sincerely. Now, buckle up, let's dig in.
South Korean intelligence reports have suggested North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is likely to choose his daughter as his successor. Not much is known about Kim Ju-ae, but she's been seen in recent public appearances alongside her father, sparking rumours that she's being groomed for the top job.
Kim Ju-ae is the most famous child in North Korea. Well, if you disagree, feel free to name another North Korean kid, any kid you know. As the only public child of the current supreme leader, her entire existence is treated like a state secret with pigtails. For years, the outside world didn't even get the basics. No confirmed name, no school photo, no birthday. We are not even sure about her age. Born in the least transparent family inside the least transparent country, everything about her was tightly controlled by the propaganda machine. The first disclosure of her name as Ju-ae did not come from Pyongyang, but from the big mouth of Dennis Rodman, Kim Jong-un's retired NBA superstar best bud. In September 2013, Rodman told reporters he had held Kim's baby daughter and said her name was Ju-ae, while praising the supreme leader as a good dad. Meanwhile, Ri Sol-ju, Kim's wife, first appeared in public view in July 2012, when she was shown in the audience at the Moranbong Band's debut concert. Soon after, North Korean media began explicitly introducing her as Kim Jong-un's wife, and she occasionally disappeared for stretches that triggered the usual pregnancy speculation cycle. When Mother's disappearance combined with Rodman's 2013 baby claim, It can be inferred that Ju-ae was most likely born in the first half of 2013. For almost a decade after Rodman's revelation, the state media never said a word about her. The sudden attitude change came in 2022, when Kim Jong-un appeared at a missile test with a young girl at his side, photographed, framed, and staged like an equally obese miniature VIP. This time, the actual KCNA report ends with a signature Pyongyang-style sentence. Officials vowed loyalty to Kim, who attended the milestone test together with his beloved daughter and wife. The regime finally stamped her existence into the national record, though her real name was still kept secret. Her national appearances kept coming. A week later, KCNA showed a new photo session, noting that Kim appeared at the venue together with his beloved daughter. In February 2023, Pyongyang had a major military parade, and Kim arrived together with his beloved daughter and his wife. In May 2024, Kim inspected a transporter erector launcher factory and was accompanied by his respected daughter. By name, our princess's official designation was changed to respected daughter to show more respect, which was pretty unconventional in the DPRK media language. It thus sparked the first wave of speculation that Ju-ae had been chosen to be the heir apparent. By late 2025, she attended more events, not limited to missile tests anymore, like Workers' Party banquet, New Year's Eve celebration, music performances, and construction deliverables. Her appearance was mostly in Pyongyang, except on September 2, 2025, when Ju-ae accompanied her father to Beijing and seized the global headlines. To be clear, our little princess's face is very public, but her name is still not. Interestingly, the North Korean state media had never mentioned her name. Kim Ju-ae is what outsiders call her, because one NBA celebrity said it first, and South Korean intelligence kept using it, while Pyongyang keeps doing what it does best, hiding all critical info about her. Some sources claim that Rodman might misunderstand the Korean words choe, which means that girl, and that the child's actual name is Unju. And a defected North Korean claims that her name is Juye, because citizens of the kingdom who luckily shared the same name as Juye were ordered to change their names. So why are we talking about succession now? Not because Kim Jong-un was on his deathbed, but because of a South Korean intelligence leak. On February 12, 2026, South Korean lawmakers, after a closed-door briefing, said the National Intelligence Service believed Kim was taking steps to consolidate his daughter's position as successor, that she had moved into an internally appointed successor stage, and there were signs she might be providing input on policy matters. South Korean media Yonhap news agency echoed this, using the phrase succession decision stage, and described her status as having advanced beyond basic dictator training. If true, that's enormous. In a family-ruled dynasty, naming a successor early is beyond risky, practically creating the perfect condition for palace coups and assassination plans. Comrade, stay patient and hear me out.
Global headlines are pointing to a successor to North Korea's de facto throne, none other than leader Kim Jong-un's daughter. Yet she is believed to be only 13, and the North's never had a female leader before. So how credible is this claim?
Any hereditary system faces the crown prince problem. It is the ultimate power struggle that dictatorships can't solve with patriotic songs and iron fists. If anything goes wrong, succession is where systems fall apart. Let's start from the basics. Everyone knows a dictator will eventually leave by natural death, forced resignation, assassination, or the rare voluntary retirement. But nobody knows when the time will come, who will replace him, and under what coalition. This creates a politics of uncertainty. Since these authoritarian regimes have very opaque structures, these uncertainties were the major axis of internal struggle. The ruler has to cultivate a successor for the hereditary dictatorship and to enable a smooth transition. But he doesn't know when he's going to die, and thus fears being ousted early by the successor. At the same time, the successor wants to accumulate enough power to survive after succession, but must avoid appearing threatening before the ruler is ready to step down. Thus, a predetermined succession order actually increases the conflict by restricting the ruler's flexibility. In other words, the moment you name an heir, you begin manufacturing your own replacement. Once your designated successor has accumulated enough power, you no longer control your fate, as someone quietly accelerates the schedule. So, Dictatorship 101, naming your heir apparent too early is creating your own political enemy. Besides, the existence of a crown prince, or a crown princess in our case, reshapes incentives for everyone around the throne. What does it mean? If elites believe a successor is real and durable, they invest early. Loyalty theatre, gift pipelines, protection alliances. All the different fabrics of the powerful elites, from military generals, indispensable technocrats, to distant relatives of the Kim family, will all start investing and hedging. The successor, essentially, is a pole of political attraction. Even if the successor is weak and passive, other politicians would project their ambitions onto them. And critically, those cryptic political dissenters will unite under the safe banner of the heir apparent, pushing for an earlier succession and hoping for positive changes, especially if the regime is under stress and the leadership is questioned. The moment you publicly raise your replacement, you literally remind everyone to imagine a world after you. And it must feel sad and stressful to witness all the loyal party cadres and army generals starting kissing somebody else's ass, even if that's your own child. Then, here's an extra trouble for any young heir. A minor cannot command institutions alone, and some kind of regent or committee must govern on their behalf. Nobody understands it better than our current supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, who ruled under the shadow of his uncle Jang for about 2 years. Even if everything is going well according to the succession plan, a modern-day authoritarian transition certainly empowers caretakers and might lead to internal palace coups. And don't forget, in a dynasty, envy is amplified by blood. We have heard enough Oedipus stories, haven't we? The backstabbing brother, the ever-envious cousin, the power-grabbing uncle. When the heir apparent is nominated, alternative candidates don't vanish but go underground. Will they do anything good for the leader and the crown princess? They are crouching tigers, ready to devour the rival alive whenever the weak point is found. So, naming a successor early is like announcing the winner before the race. It doesn't end the competition, it just moves to the next stage of sabotage. With everything said, do you think it's true that Kim Jong-un has decided and internally announced his heir? Plus, this crown princess is only a 13-year-old who ought to be in middle school in any normal country. This is precisely why Pyongyang historically controlled the exposure of potential candidates carefully, groomed the real successors quietly, and only formalized the plan when necessary. That's why authoritarian regimes prefer ambiguity, which keeps everyone guessing and alert, not committed to any particular political clique.
On a viewing stand above a portrait of the nation's founder, Kim Il-sung, North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-il, and his son, Kim Jong-un, watched the largest military parade in the country's 62-year history this past weekend. 16,000 troops.
One wise man once said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Well, I bet Pyongyang is more than happy to repeat its glorious past of the peaceful power transitions within the revolutionary Kim family. If the little princess of the kingdom is really being lined up for the throne, then the only available textbook is the family archive. The rules of the game were written when Kim Il-sung turned a revolution into a monarchy and then solved the succession question by promoting his son from dear comrade to dear leader without ever mentioning the word prince. So before speculating about a fourth Kim and the first potential empress, it is useful to rewind to the previous transitions, from Kim Il-sung to Kim Jong-il, and from Kim Jong-il to Kim Jong-un, and see how a system that officially rejects feudalism managed to execute two of the cleanest hereditary successions in modern political history. First, the heir apparent must have a strong resume. Kim Jong-il's apprenticeship began early and quietly. After graduating from the Department of Political Economy at Kim Il-sung University in 1964, he started his career in the Organizational Bureau, a part of the party that decides who gets what position and who stops getting invited to meetings. From there, he moved into the most critical department of propaganda, where he oversaw revolutionary films and anti-imperialist posters. He first served as a section leader in 1967, and then as the deputy department chief in 1969. By 1973, he had been elected as the party secretary for propaganda and the chief of the Organizational Bureau. Organization and propaganda sound very dull and bureaucratic, but in fact, these two are the control panels of the North Korean society that essentially dictate everything else. So, 1973 was the year when Kim Jong-il really began to emerge as the internal heir, as the party's HR boss and the chief storyteller. Kim Jong-un, by comparison, had a much thinner resume, largely because of his age. When Kim Jong-il was presented as the crown prince in 1980, he was already 38, and Kim Il-sung still had 14 years to live. But when Kim Jong-un's status was formalized in 2010, he was only about 26, and his dear daddy was visibly nearing the end. Out of nowhere, on September 27, 2010, Kim Jong-un was promoted to 4-star general in the Korean People's Army, though he had no visible military career. The next day, at the third conference of the Workers' Party of Korea, he was elected vice chairman of the party's Central Military Commission and made a member of the Workers' Party Central Committee. Those two moves gave him exactly what he needed on paper: a high military rank to stand beside generals, and a senior party post in the organ that decides internal affairs. From then on, he appeared in the leadership photo lineups near his father, and state media coverage of the party conference made it clear that he had jumped straight into the core leadership as the ultimate Nepo kid. So, where Kim Jong-il had 20 years to build networks, redesign institutions, and cultivate his image as party center, Kim Jong-un had to go from ghost to general in one party conference, then be sold to the military and the public as the inevitable third-generation supreme leader. Thinking from this angle, if Kim Jong-un had any health issues and the succession was imperative, Princess Jue would be immediately conferred many prestigious titles and start serving critical roles in both the Workers' Party and the military. Well, given her age, I propose our little princess for the role of the chief of the National Sartorial Committee or the head of the Workers' Party Bureau of Fashion. However, nothing happened yet, and we have to patiently wait for the news from Pyongyang. Second, North Korea has a tradition of first internally designating the heir and publicizing it later. Credible historical sources claim Kim Jong-il was named the successor internally in 1974, but only publicly formalized his position in the 6th Party Congress in 1980, 6 years after the internal decision. The same rule applied to Kim Jong-un. His brother Jong-nam was abducted in 2001 due to the infamous and shameful Tokyo Disneyland incident, and Jong-un was soon internally announced as the new crown prince. But the DPRK state media only started mentioning Kim Jong-un by name in 2010. The pattern is clear. The successor must be institutionalized first and only then shown in public, ideally when all other options have already been erased. So, a decision may have already been made within the party, and the intelligence report from the fake Korea is accurate. It's all possible, but we'd better wait for the formal confirmation from the future party congress. Third, in the Kimdom, succession is never settled by titles, but only by the death of the previous Kim. All the promotions, uniforms, and photo placements are rehearsals. The real handover happens the moment the older portrait becomes a funeral portrait, and the system has to prove it can move seamlessly to the next frame. Kim Jong-il's long grooming looked impressive, but nothing was guaranteed until Kim Il-sung died in 1994. Even though Kim Jong-il was officially North Korea's commander-in-chief since 1991, he still had to perform his daddy's ever-obedient child in public. Kim Jong-un's meteoric rise looked precarious, but it became irreversible when his father's obituary was read, and all security organs pivoted to enforcing loyalty to him. The Kim dynasty has treated every heir as provisional until the actual succession happens. The abdicated sons, like Kim Pyong-il and Kim Jong-nam, were the best proof. So, being groomed as the leader is one thing, and the actual transition of power is another thing. Even if Kim Ju-ae was trained as a competitive candidate to the throne, as long as his supreme daddy is still alive, her position is not secured. Fourth, Korean society is extremely patriarchal. Even South Korean intelligence has repeatedly emphasized that North Korea is deeply patriarchal and male-dominated, calling for caution about reading a young girl as heir apparent. For over 5 centuries, the Joseon dynasty was built on a Neo-Confucian patriarchy so strict it eventually became a kind of operating system. Fathers over sons, husbands over wives, elder over younger, male lineage over everything. Women existed in the records mostly as wives, mothers, and instruments of alliances, rarely as sovereigns. Although feudal Joseon Korea had some female regents for their underage sons, none of those strong women held the official title. Fast forward our timeline, since 1948, every ruler of North Korea has been a man from the sacred Paektu bloodline, and the state ideology has been wrapped around a very traditional image of the father leader, the family patriarch who protects the nation. The North Korean society is built on male seniority and military credentials. It's a patriarchy where women, including those from privileged families, routinely report discrimination and marginalization. In other words, putting a girl in the center of propaganda ops does not magically erase decades of institutional misogyny. So, is there a way to make North Korea more genderly equal and pave the path for its first empress? It's possible. The magic term is Paektusan. That's right, comrade. You do not abolish patriarchy, but upgrade it with mythology. In North Korean political theology, the Kim family is not just a random clan. It is marketed as the revolutionary Paektu lineage, descended symbolically from Mount Paektu, the sacred mountain that the regime presents as the birthplace of the anti-Japanese revolution and the fictional birthplace of Kim Jong-il. Over decades, the state has repeated this myth until Paektu bloodline became a kind of political DNA test. The supreme leader does not rule because of competence, but because of his or her sacred revolutionary bloodline trickled down from the holy mountain. If the highest succession principle is not patriarchy, but the leader must belong to the Paektu bloodline, then gender becomes negotiable. the propaganda can shift its focus from father of the nation to lineage of the nation. In the past, the leader was described as the son, the brain, the fatherly leader. If needed, those metaphors can be feminized, or at least neutralized. You know, the motherly leader sounds okay to me. The propaganda machine has rewritten history many times. Just do it one more time. This is why the propaganda officers get paid better. So, if there is any sign of female leadership, we would witness a shift of emphasis from the party's mouthpieces. The toxic masculinity will be downplayed with some new metaphors about the divine femininity. Finally, a regency problem. A child successor is not an immediate successor. When the chosen heir is doing high school homework, someone must govern in their place. When Kim Il-sung died in 1994, Kim Jong-il was already in his 50s. He had decades of party work behind him, and the system kept working without any caretaker. But the transition from Kim Jong-il to Kim Jong-un was rushed and fragile. When the dear leader was on his deathbed, there were suspicious protectors and handler figures around Kim Jong-un, like Jang Song-taek and Kim Gyong-hui, those seasoned political relatives with long experience in the system. Outside analysts routinely described Uncle Jang as a de facto regent, the man smoothing the handover, reassuring the elite, keeping the machinery running while the young leader grew into the role. Then, once Kim Jong-un felt strong enough, Jang was arrested, denounced as a traitor worse than a dog, and executed. Anyhow, such a regent was proven necessary during the turbulent times to pacify those ill-minded political factions. In short, a child on the throne means adults behind the throne. If Kim Ju-ae succeeds the throne before becoming a seasoned politician, the regime likely will invent a polite title, something like a guiding committee or a collective leadership under the wise guidance of the supreme leader Kim Ju-ae. But in practice, there would be a regent, or several, competing to act as the voice of the minor. And it certainly means political destabilization and risks the collapse of the Kim dynasty. After our history lesson, what do you think? Wouldn't it be too early to designate a 13-year-old as the crown princess? Can a minor make any meaningful decision? And will big party cadres surrender their power and submit their loyalty to a female leader? I think you have your own answers, comrades. I personally don't think a minor can lead a country just because she attended some missile test launches and clapped at some military parades.
Previously considered the second most powerful man in North Korea, Jang Song-taek, uncle of leader Kim Jong-un, has been executed. Armed guards removed Jang from a Communist Party meeting earlier this week, after which he was stripped of all official responsibilities. North Korean news agency KCNA said he was executed immediately after a military tribunal found him guilty of treason for seeking to overthrow the state.
Take a step back. Let's presume the Crown Princess's claim is true. Then why would Pyongyang do it? There are only a few rational answers, and they are not mutually exclusive. First, Kim Jong-un perhaps wants to emphasize the Kim family's permanent rule and clearly establish the pattern. Uncertainty makes people doubt, so our leader says it loud and clear. The supreme leadership is generational. It lets loyal comrades and big party cadres rest assured that their power will be generational as well. Thus, it reduces the chance of any palace intrigue. Second, the supreme leader is preparing to solve the future legitimacy problem. We briefly mentioned the legitimacy problem in our fatness episode. Since the DPRK calls itself a republic, even being born as the leader's beloved child, little Ju-ae needs a strong resume to inherit the kingdom. The first Gen Kim was the guerrilla hero who founded the nation. The second-gen Kim led the nation to survive the great and grim famine of the 90s. The third-gen Kim manufactured his legitimacy through his fatness and iron grip. So to pass the power down, Kim Jong-un is trying to sign his daughter up for more extracurricular activities and hyping her up for the future throne. The third possibility is that Kim Jong-un was low-key sick, diagnosed with some irreversible or incurable disease. In the past years, our chain-smoking comrade Kim has shown some obesity-related symptoms and had a temporary weight loss journey. But South Korean intelligence reports said Kim appeared to have no major health problems. He was still young, just entered his 40s, leaving many variables for the succession speculation. With no imminent medical crisis, Kim Jong-un might secretly suffer from some chronic illness and plan for a smooth succession in the next few decades from an early day. So here is the point. The fact that Kim Ju-ae is being groomed does not automatically mean succession is imminent. The regime is building a longer and safer runway, precisely because short runways are deadly. In these scenarios, to make the succession plan work, certain conditions are not optional but mandatory. First, she would need a coalition, not a crown. A monarchy is never only about the one at the top. It is an agreement that creates groups of political elites who share the same interests. For Ju-ae to take power in any real sense, a dominant group of party, military, and security elites has to decide that her succession is their safest survival route. The bloodline matters only if they believe the choice is credible and enforceable. Only when the generals and party secretaries conclude that opposing her is more dangerous than accepting her do they fall in line. Second, the military has to be bound in. In North Korea, regime stability is not a philosophical issue. The imperialist paper tigers are hawkish. The capitalist enemies are located just down the 38th parallel. So they keep pairing Kim Ju-ae's image with missiles, launch vehicles, saluting officers, and arsenals, as if the legitimacy comes from repeated staged photo exposure. The military must believe Kim Ju-ae as a strong woman who will lead the soldiers to defend their motherland. Then, the protocol has to be hardened. Right now, she appears at key events, but without a formal title, only vague references like his respected daughter. For a real succession track, the system would start to institutionalize her place. That means her name, once the supreme leader permits its use, will always appear in specific order in articles, always mentioned together with her father in a fixed sequence. New honorifics will be invented just for her, and perhaps to have youth organizations or slogans built around her image. Eventually, she will chair some offices that justify her presence in official lineups. Finally, and most difficult, the propaganda machine would have to rewrite a new social norm. To make a female supreme leader feel natural, the regime would have to retell its own story on loop, not awkward slogans like "three great fathers and then a great mother." That requires new campaigns, children's books, history lessons, songs, slogans, and their 10,000 repetitions. You may argue that this process has already begun in miniature, alongside each of her exposures at major state events. If all of that happens, then yes, let's welcome the first Empress of the kingdom, at least on paper. But notice how high that bar is. It is not impossible. The Juche ideology is very elastic when survival is at stake, but it will come with risks and costs. So if Kim Ju-ae does one day inherit the throne, it will not be because she happened to stand next to the missile launcher. It will be because she was backed by a coalition that decided she was the best option for their self-interests, a military that accepted the new face on the command chain, a protocol that froze her place in the hierarchy, and a brainwashing scheme that convinced a patriarchal society that it is more about bloodline than about gender.
Told mourners Kim Jong-un had inherited his father's ideology, character and revolutionary cause.
Our great comrade Kim Jong-il has solved the leadership succession matter perfectly, which is the most precious accomplishment for our country's destiny and endless prosperity of our descendants.
The young leader looked on from a balcony, top party and military officials at his side. The focus may have been on the late leader, but North Korea has many problems.
Before we crown the little princess of the kingdom, we have to ask a boring but necessary question. What if Seoul is bluffing, or at least overstating how certain it really is? We have to understand what this South Korean report really means. The intelligence assessments are predictions, not prophecies. It was a closed-door briefing that turned into headlines by lawmakers and journalists, each with their own incentives. And above all, inter-Korean politics weaponizes narratives like verbal artillery. This isn't saying Seoul's National Intelligence Service is lying. It is Seoul's interpretation of Pyongyang's signals and whatever classified material they have, summarized by politicians, then hyped and exaggerated by reporters. By now, all possibilities remain open, especially since Kim Jong-un must have other children, judging by his wife's disappearance cycles. So the problem is that the news agency and your friends on Twitter are making this uncertain prediction into a certain prophecy. Could this narrative be Seoul's misinformation or a deliberate distraction? Possible. Framing Kim Joo-ae as an internally appointed successor does several things at once. It reminds everyone that North Korea is not a normal state, but a hereditary monarchy with nuclear weapons, a family firm that plans to pass intercontinental missiles down like heirlooms. Besides, a child successor makes the regime look more feudal and irrational. Politicians can argue for a bigger defense budget, or facilitate a bigger arms trade with the United States. It might also be a psychological warfare tactic. Announcing to the world that a successor has already been chosen does not reach ordinary North Koreans, who are sealed off from foreign media, but it does reach the people who matter, the ones who sit at the tables, not listed on the menu. Senior cadres, potential heirs, security chiefs, and relatives like Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, all know how to read outside news, or at least have staff who do it for them. When they see headline after headline declaring that the daughter is the heir, they do not treat it as gossip. They treat it as a possible signal or a possible trap. If you support the narrative too quickly and it turns out to be wrong, you look foolish. If you resist it and it turns out to be right, you look disloyal. Either way, it makes you paranoid. In a system like this, rumor is shrapnel. It flies into the elite circle and forces everyone to recalibrate their loyalty. For Seoul, amplifying the idea that the line of succession is fixed is a low-cost trap that increases the stress of Pyongyang's upper echelon. If Joo-ae is genuinely the plan, it puts pressure on the other candidates. If there is no such plan, it still forces the regime to waste energy managing perceptions and correcting expectations. And in that ambiguity lies the simplest possibility of all, that the little princess is both a real daughter and a useful bluff, and that nobody outside the Kim family will know who she really is, and who will succeed the throne until the day a new portrait quietly takes the central spot on every household's wall. Don't forget, Kim Jong-un and Ri Sol-ju likely parent more than one child. The moment the state admits there is a second or third child, there is no longer just the heir, but also the spare. And if there is a son among those invisible siblings, he immediately becomes the most likely alternative. A boy of the Paek-2 bloodline fits the traditional script much more comfortably than a girl, even if he is younger. That means Ju-ae's rise can be read two ways. Either she is the chosen one, despite that cultural bias, which would be a genuine break with habit, or she is the safe, photogenic decoy, while a brother is kept in reserve for a more orthodox handover. We just couldn't tell from the outside. So, where does this all leave us? Is North Korea about to crown its first Empress of the Kim dynasty, or is it just another season of propaganda and paranoia? The honest answer is, we don't know, and maybe neither do the Kims. Right now, the rumor mill is churning with invisible brothers, recycled uncles, and a grudging auntie. Kim Ju-ae's road to power remains long and winding. But with all these uncertainties, it's certain that, even if she succeeds the throne, by that time, she will not be the innocent child we see today in the fur coat beside the missile truck. She will be a product of the system that raised her, and that system is very good at turning innocent children into brutal dictators. The propaganda will say she is different, new, modern, softer, feminine, but her job will be the same as her male ancestors, to maintain an alliance between bloodline and technocrats, to keep a country obedient. The iconography of the fatherly leader would quietly become that of the protective daughter, the mother of the nation, who inherited the sacred blood stemming from the sacred Paektusan. The posters would show children not just saluting her, but hugging her, unconsciously dropping tears of joy. A young empress would have to prove to her generals and her security chiefs that she can keep them safe from their greatest fear, internal collapse. That means continuity first, any reform second. Foreign policy would become even more theatrical. A young female leader who presides over nuclear tests and missile launches would confuse every lazy stereotype about dictators. Western media would line up to project their hopes and prejudices onto her. Some would hope for a reformer, others would see a hollow princess raised in a bunker. Beijing and Moscow would treat her as a dynastic asset that must be managed carefully. Washington and Seoul would worry that a fresh face makes it easier for the regime to reset its international image without changing its behavior. Her first few years of rule would likely look like her daddy's early period, but a sharper wave of purges and promotions will eventually prove that she is not a figurehead, but a true supreme leader. For the ordinary North Korean, the difference might be less dramatic than outsiders imagine. The portraits in the home would change, the slogans at school would change, the face on the news would change, the structure would not. Food, electricity, and fear would remain the daily metrics of politics. If she is clever, she will allow just enough improvement to claim that her rule has brought a new era, while blaming every remaining hardship on encirclement and the long shadow of the past. A North Korea ruled by Kim Ju-ae would not be a fairy tale or a disaster movie. It would be the same system, stretched further than anyone expected, proving again that what really rules the country is not the leader in the portrait, but the fear and greed of a group of self-interested bureaucrats who always surrender their power to someone surnamed Kim.